Good evening, everyone. On a fall bicycle ride 5 years ago, in an instant, I was thrown, literally, into a dozen worlds that I knew nothing about, from hospitals to handicap parking, from Hoya lifts to home care. Still, it's amazing to me how in just a split second, someone's path can be completely changed. You see me tonight in a wheelchair, but I wasn't always like this. So let me give you a little history. When I was in college, I was fascinated with Wall Street. The buzz, the excitement, the adrenaline, and of course the money. So when I graduated from the Wharton School, I soon migrated to Wall Street. My work was good, it was satisfying, and it was also the very symbol of excess, greed, and Gordon Gekko. I was on the street for the highlights of the last 30 years. I worked at E.F. Hutton during the October '87 crash. 3 days later, E.F. Hutton crashed. In 1993, I was walking by the World Trade Center on the way to meet a client for a lunch when the first bombing occurred. On 9/11, I was sitting in my desk at Lehman Brothers in the World Financial Center, just across the street from the Trade Center, when the airplanes hit the towers. We were evacuated, and I went outside, and I looked at people jumping from the North Tower, and then I saw both towers fall in front of me. In 2008, I was still at Lehman, this time for her demise, because she was the only firm designated not too big to fail. I lost everything. And then I moved over to Barclay. But my career as a managing director at Barclay was cut short on November 26, 2011. And it has nothing to do with the markets. Before then, my life was going pretty much as I had planned. I had a great family and an amazing wife, 3 daughters who were healthy and well-adjusted. My work was stimulating and successful. I had an active life. I was a great skier. I was a strong cyclist. I was a good runner. And I was a lousy golfer. But fitness was always an integral part of my life. And that's why, on that fall day, I was out there riding. I was out with a group of friends. We went for a 50-mile bike ride up to Harriman State Park in New York. We were on our way back, almost home, and it was 1:06 on a Saturday afternoon, and all of a sudden, an out-of-control SUV comes barreling at us. The driver crossed 2 lanes of traffic, and she went into us head-on, no brakes. She hit my friend Zach first, and then she hit me. For the life of me, I still can't figure out how on a beautiful sunny afternoon somebody can fall so fast asleep. I was immediately medevaced to Hackensack Medical Center, but they didn't think I was going to survive. I had massive internal injuries, orthopedic injuries, a smashed spine. But against all odds, the trauma surgeons did a tremendous job. They saved my life not once, but several times in the ensuing couple of weeks. But there's not much they can do about a smashed spinal cord. I'm a paraplegic, and I'll never walk again. After 51 days at Hackensack, not that I'm counting, I moved over to Kessler. Kessler is one of the most renowned spinal cord injury hospitals in the country. And the objective and the goal of the therapist there is to teach me how to live life as a paraplegic. I got to tell you, I had a lot of goals in life. This was not on my bucket list. Every night, I'd cry myself to sleep, hoping, praying that I'd wake up in the morning and the whole thing would be a bad dream. It was bad, all right, but it was no dream. After 3 months, 5 months in total, I came home. The enormity of the loss of independence was stark. In my home, I had nurses and caregivers and therapists and infusions and drips and drains and wounds, and I could barely move. It got to the point I didn't even want to see guests because it just drove home this new reality for me. I had a lot of why me's. Why me? I wasn't doing anything wrong. Why did this happen? What are the odds at that very moment that SUV would lose control and go into me head on into the curb? I can't say there's any one catalyst that started me on the road to emotional recovery. All I can say is that in bits and pieces, I started to resign myself to my new reality. My family, and particularly my wife, were incredibly supportive. They were there all the time for me. But you know, time moves on. My girls were growing up. They didn't need me to kick the soccer ball or help them with homework anymore. What they needed was for me to teach them a much more important lesson: how to handle whatever life throws at you. I had always expected to return to Barclays. But each time I was about to go back, I had another medical setback, and it got pushed back. And as time went on, I realized I didn't want to return to corporate America or Wall Street. At about this time, one of my closest and dearest friends, Anne, died in an equestrian accident while competing. Her death hit me really hard. I kept thinking at the funeral and afterwards what her family would give to have her back there with them again, even in a wheelchair. That was sort of a turning point for me. Previously, I'd always considered myself a victim. Now I realized I was a survivor. Anne was a native South African, and she was an amazing person. And she was really committed to giving back, particularly to her home continent. She heard a lecture about the problems in Rwanda post the genocide and how there was a real issue with all the orphans. And she thought, you know, Israel had a similar problem with the orphans after the Holocaust, and they built a residential village, a residential school. That would work, and that would transfer to Rwanda. And she single-handedly marshaled the political and financial support to make it happen. And it's been an enormous success. I think about Anne a lot. We grew up with similar ideals, that we could go out there and make a difference in the world. And she had done it. And me? Well, I was reassessing my life. So I started thinking, what could I do? What kind of impact could I have? How could I change the status quo? How could I help people? Well, as it turns out, because of my accident, I was exposed to an enormous social problem that I was uniquely qualified to address. And that is my idea that I'm here to present with you tonight. America's home care system is broken, and I'm working on fixing it. When you're in the throes of building a career, you can't really step back and think about doing things differently, right? But here I was, because of my situation, I was stepped back, and I could start thinking about things differently. And I started thinking about home care, and I had a lot of questions. Why is home care so expensive when you go through an agency? Why is it so restrictive? Why are caregivers paid so poorly when they work through an agency? Why do you have no choice who comes into your home? Why? Well, why couldn't I just come up with a platform and give families the choice of hand-picked, highly recommended caregivers that they could go out and hire privately and directly? And on top of that, we could give them top-of-the-line vetting that's accessible to them and caregivers that are accessible for backup or replacement. 5 years ago, after that 5 months in hospitals, when I came back, I discovered something that most of you probably don't know because I didn't know it. And that is, home care is not covered by health insurance. Let me say that again. Home care is not covered by health insurance. Whether it's private insurance the way I had it or Medicare, it doesn't really matter. You get a few days a week for a few weeks, and then you're done. Period. Kaput. Stuck to figure it out on your own and to pay for it on your own. So with that in mind, as I started thinking about my home care, I had two options. One was, okay, I'll continue with the home care agency I've been using. Now I'm going to pay out of pocket. They told me it'd be $25 an hour with a 4-hour minimum. But I only need 2 hours of care in the morning. So now we're talking about at least $100 a day for the rest of my life. I looked at Plan B. And that's to hire a caregiver on your own, and that is what most people do, because it's less expensive. But as I looked at that option, I realized that's fraught with problems too. You really don't know much about these caregivers that you bring into your home to care for your parent or to care for your spouse or some other loved one. You just don't know. You don't know the vetting, you don't know the references, you don't know the experience, you don't even know if they have a criminal record. That was a real problem. And you know what's even worse? How would you find a caregiver? That is the underground market. You look on Craigslist, you look in the classified section, you look for a word-of-mouth recommendation. My neighbor's uncle's cousin used someone over a year ago. That's no way to find someone, is it? That was a void, and I knew that we could do a better job with that. Most people don't think about home care until a crisis happens, until it falls in your lap. Your mother falls, your husband develops Parkinson's, your aunt forgets to turn off the stove and starts a fire again. What we have here with senior care in America is a tsunami that's building. Look, you all know the demographics. You've heard them. People are getting older, they're living longer, and they overwhelmingly, as much as 90%, choose to age at home, aging in place. So that's something to think about. The way I think about it is there are three key problems to address. The first is the enormous cost of home care when you're going through an agency. It's just prohibitive for most people. It's fine when the insurance company's paying for it, but when you're paying out of pocket, you don't want it to go on for too long. I believe the home care system needs to change. Just like the taxi system and just like the hotel system, Americans don't want to pay for a middleman. And that's why they're migrating to this underground market. The second problem is caregivers. They are paid way too little. They can't earn a living when they're going through an agency. You may be paying $25 an hour. They're only getting 9, 10, or 11. That's less than a babysitter gets. We all know about the demand for caregivers, but what about the supply? How are you going to incentivize people to go into this profession if they can't earn a living? The third issue is choice. We in America are a consumer-driven economy that wants choice. We want choice in knowing that the caregiver we hire has been vetted. But we also want choice in knowing that the caregiver is a good fit. The caregiver's personalities, interests, skill sets are all a match with yours. That's what you want. Right now, you can get more information on buying a new flat-screen TV than you can on bringing a caregiver into your home. Now look, I know this is very difficult to do on your own. And that's why I made it my mission to make it easier to get a trusted alternative to the underground. We have stringent screening process. We have low margins to make it less expensive. The caregivers set their own rates, and the families get to choose someone who's a good fit for them and how much they're willing to pay. Up to this date, we have met over 600 caregivers and brought them on our system. And we have served hundreds of families by giving them care that's fitted for them. We've also met with plenty of hospitals and rehab centers and geriatric care managers who are enthralled with our innovative solution and are recommending us. From where I sit, I understand that finding good home care is a big problem. And if it weren't for my terrible tragedy, I wouldn't have been here. But because of that, I've been able to come up with an innovative solution that makes it easier on everybody. And it's been quite a journey from the Wild West of Wall Street to the Wild West of home care. But I know I'm helping people, and that gives me purpose. And I know that it's a big change from getting stuck in the midst of the greed and glory. Today, my glory is my story and my work in fixing the home care system. Thank you very much.